So this video is going to be a review and my final thoughts on the Cobalt build. If you haven't watched the build series, I highly suggest that you watch it before watching this video. Like I think I said before, when the accident happened, I originally thought that the damage was all superficial. I was able to drive it to the place that I was driving to. However, as I got close to the place, I noticed the temperature start to creep up. Unfortunately, it does not have a temp gauge. It only tells you the temperature, but it doesn't give you any idea of what its normal operating temperature is. So I decided to play it safe and have it towed home. I used the normal tow company that I use, and then on Monday I drove it to the local body shop. Now, I've worked with them before and they do amazing work. When I got the quote, I knew that the car would probably be totaled by the insurance company. Now, like I said, they do amazing work. I'm not saying that they were overcharging. If I had paid the price, I would have got a great car at the end. It would have been better than the day I got it. However, I didn't want to put the money in myself, and it seemed such a shame to let the insurance company scrap it. So the quote was $3,500, and a non-salvage title Cobalt went for around $4,000. I was debating what to do with the car for about a year. Mostly I was just putting off trying to figure out how much it would cost to fix it myself. Breaking down the quote, $1,500 was for parts and the rest was for paint and labor. I called and emailed some local junkyards and found all the parts that I needed at another local junkyard. So the body shop quote called for replacing the front bumper cover, the grille, the impact absorbing foam, the radiator, the AC condenser, the hood, the left fender, radiator support brackets, and a headlight assembly and mounting bracket. When I finally decided to make a go at repairing the car myself, I surveyed the damage to see what I actually needed. Well, I did need a bumper cover, and the impact absorbing foam was broken. I probably could have salvaged it, but I decided not to. I did need a new headlight assembly as the old one was completely destroyed, but I didn't pay attention to the quote and therefore didn't realize that I was missing a bracket for the headlight assembly. So I had to buy the bracket after I got the headlamp and realized that there was another piece missing. The hood and the fender I could salvage. They were the most expensive components and they still worked, so I was able to bend the hood and was able to salvage it. I also realized that the radiator brackets were perfectly fine and the AC condenser was fine. Now, I've still not done a full AC check, but I did turn the AC on and it seemed to blow colder than it would if there was no AC. So I decided not to replace the condenser. And since I didn't have to replace the condenser, I wouldn't have to deal with the refrigerant inside. I received a quote for the grill. I thought that was pretty expensive for such a small piece of plastic, so I was able to salvage the old grill with some JB Weld. However, when I went to pick up the bumper cover and the other stuff I ordered from the junkyard, the grill was already installed in the new bumper cover. Well, used bumper cover. This along with the impact absorbing foam. This saved me a lot of time and effort, and it made the car look much better. All the junkyard parts cost close to $300. Another $50 went towards paint, sandpaper, and the extra clips and fasteners for the body panels. And also a headlight restoration kit so that the headlights looked a little less mismatched. For paint, I brought pieces of the old bumper cover, which still had that greenish gold paint that you see on the hood, and also the white paint. And I found rattle cans, spray paint that closely matched. The rest of the stuff included just normal maintenance, oil and filter, transmission fluid. I ended up having to buy more transmission fluid because of the mistake that I made when swapping out the radiator. I also got, antifreeze and a new thermostat because in my experience, thermostats can break during an impact. And I also had to get new pads and rotors because the old ones were rusted from sitting so long. So the first video was all about taking off the old bumper cover and taking out the old radiator. The bumper cover, I mentioned in the video that there's an easier way of taking off the bumper cover. It's just one of those things that you can't really know until you've taken it apart. But taking out the headlight assembly exposes some more bolts, and when you undo those bolts, the bumper cover comes off a lot easier. So it's just one of those things. I couldn't have predicted it. I was just taking apart everything that I saw, and then once I got the bumper cover off, I could actually look at how everything attaches and how everything works. I got the old radiator out, and then I needed to move the car. Of course, I thought, well, I've already drained the coolant out, so it should be fine, right? What I didn't realize was that the transmission intercooler ran on a separate circuit within the radiator, and that flushed automatic transmission fluid. And so I had to spend quite a bit of time. This was probably the most time-consuming day because I was just getting started and didn't really know what I was doing. I was just trying to figure it out as I went along. The second video was all about installing the new radiator. Installing the new radiator went a lot better than taking out the old one because I had already seen how everything worked, and so it was just a lot simpler to install that new radiator. So I got that installed. I started the car up to make sure that it wasn't leaking out any more fluids, and then that's really about it. I talk about the headlights. I decided to replace both the headlights. This is also the point where I realized that I was missing another bracket, so I had to go and get that from the junkyard. So this build was my first time really trying to do work and film it all at the same time. And so I got a little bit disorganized. Some of the footage, like painting and installing the headlights, some of that footage got lost. Some of the things I just didn't record, and so it was definitely a learning experience as far as figuring out how to record a video while trying to do work. So what happened with the wiring harness? So the junkyard headlights came with a wiring harness, and I plugged in the old bulb that I had from the headlight assembly that I took off because the turn signals didn't match. So I had that bulb, I had installed it in the junkyard headlight assembly, and when I installed it in the car, the headlight blew. It turned out that the wiring harness on the junkyard headlight assembly was faulty. So I replaced the wiring harness. I actually had a few of these wiring harnesses lying around. I had one from the headlight assembly that I had taken off, and the wiring harness from the headlight assembly that had been destroyed was still around. And so I just replaced the wiring harness on the headlight assembly and got a new bulb, and everything worked. The rest of this episode is all stuff that I would not have had to do if I had realized what was going on with the radiator in the first episode. So if I had realized that automatic transmission fluid flowed through the radiator and I didn't start the car, I wouldn't have had to top off the automatic transmission fluid. But I didn't realize that, and so I had to top off the automatic transmission fluid so that I could actually drive the car. When the car gets low on fluid, the torque converter doesn't work properly and you can't drive. So it's one of those things, you start doing something, you mess up, and then you make a little more work for yourself, but you learn from it. And I definitely learned a lot from this build. The fourth episode is replacing the thermostat and then refilling the cooling system. I decided to replace the thermostat because in a car I had previously that had been in an accident, the thermostat went shortly after the accident. I don't know whether it was connected to the accident or not, but I figured as long as I replaced the radiator and had to drain out all the coolant, I may as well replace the thermostat before I put more coolant in. And the thermostat that I replaced was in a Toyota, and to get at the thermostat, you had to take off the alternator and the water pump. So this one, the thermostat was a little bit easier to get to, but as you can see, it was still kind of down in the engine with some wires. One of the things I was really trying to struggle with is I hate YouTube how-to videos where you can't see what's going on. And so I was constantly trying to make an effort, especially when I tell you where certain bolts are. And so I was really trying to make an effort to make sure that the area was well lit and that you could see all the bolts. It is definitely hard to do, and that is something that I need to work on, making sure that you see all of the steps required to do this kind of stuff. So I replaced the thermostat, and I mention in the video somewhere that the Cobalt has a special fill procedure. I was reading the manual and it's like, hey, make sure you use this specific procedure to fill the coolant. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll have to follow that to the letter. But then once I started reading it, I realized that it's the same procedure that you would do with any vehicle, except the coolant reservoir is separate. You don't fill the radiator and then the overflow. You fill just the overflow and it flows into the radiator and everything. But as far as bleeding the coolant system, it's exactly the same as any other car. And that is the last bit that I filmed. I think I mentioned that I got into kind of a time crunch. I also had some problems with losing some footage, and so I didn't get to film putting the new bumper cover on. I didn't get to film anything with the paint. The paint was one thing that kind of worried me. I had never really done a painting project that was that big, that was supposed to be that nice. I've painted houses before and stuff like that, but I was just really worried about it turning out all right. I think I got 5 coats of white paint on the bumper cover. I didn't actually get to touch up the paint on the hood or the fender or door. That is a plan for this coming year. But I got like 5 coats of paint on the bumper cover. The first coat was beautiful, but then I accidentally scuffed some of it, and in the process of trying to fix that, I almost made it worse. I was able to recover, and it now looks good from distances of more than 2 feet away. Once you get within a couple feet, you can kind of see some of the spots. Some of the spots are where I messed up. Some of the spots are where there were deeper nicks in the used bumper cover. And as much as I tried to sand them out, they could not all come out. So if I were to do it again, I would definitely add even more coats of paint. I just ran out of time with that. And I would also take better care, take my time with the painting. But overall, I think it turned out well. The car ran and drove, and everything seemed to be connected. So what you've been watching this whole time is just me taking the car for a bit of a test drive up and down the road. So the final bill for all the materials that I used in the build was $620. Now that covered everything except tires. I got new tires for the car because, of course, tires were the reason for the accident in the first place. So I got new tires. I ended up, they were gifted to me, and so I didn't have to pay for those. It was about $100 per tire. So with the tires, the total would have come out to about $1,000.